Good morning, students. Welcome back for the zoology session. See, in all these zoology sessions, what we have will be further dealing is like in your second year, we have human anatomy and physiology. In this anatomy and physiology, we have to learn about different systems in our body, like digestive, respiratory, coordination, circulatory, and also the reproductive. So now we started the sessions with the physiology and anatomy and physiology of the digestive system. Now, anatomy part consists of only the structures, whereas physiology parts consists of the functioning of the system. Now, along with this, not only anatomy and physiology, but we have to learn about the disorders or the diseases caused by uh, occur in this system. So let us now complete the first unit by this session by Mrs. Prasanna Kumari, PGT, Gunagala, working as at Gunagala, Suryapeta district. So, yeah, you can introduce. Okay, Suryapet district. So she'll be dealing the last part of the digestive system, where now you'll be learning about the absorption, assimilation, and also the disorders in the digestive system. Okay, okay. I'll request Prasanna madam to take over.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, students. Let me introduce myself. This is Prasanna Kumari, PGT Zoology from Telangana Model School, Munagala, Suryapet district. Yeah, we are in the first unit, that is anatomy and physiology of human beings, especially dealing with the digestive system. Already in the previous class, we discussed digestive system is formed of two parts. Again, I am recapitulating this. That is alimentary canal and digestive glands. So far, we have finished the alimentary canal, anatomy of the alimentary canal and different digestive glands associated with the alimentary canal. Next, also we discussed the digestion, physiology of digestion. Majorly, the physiology of digestion or digestive system function is, it is mainly helping in performing a life activity or life process, that is nutrition. Nutrition itself includes 5 different steps like ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and digestion. Nutrition involves 5 different processes: ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and digestion. Ingestion is nothing but simply intaking of food into the buccal cavity or into the mouth. Once we take food into the buccal cavity, the food gets masticated or chewed among the tooth. With the help of salivary amylase enzyme, partial digestion also takes place. So, ingestion is followed by digestion. Digestion is nothing but breakdown of complex food substances into smaller and absorbable substances. What happens once the mastication takes place in the buccal cavity, and what are the components that are present in the food which we are taking? This digestion is followed by the different steps: absorption, assimilation, and digestion. We'll discuss in the proceeding session. So today's topics, what I would like to deal with are peristalsis, absorption of digested food, assimilation, defecation, gastrointestinal hormones, calorific values of different macromolecules, that is carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, disorders of the digestive system. Though the digestive system helps in digestion or nutrition process, this digestive system also attacked by certain pathogens that are causing disorders. Okay, today's topics are peristalsis, absorption of digested food, assimilation, defecation, gastrointestinal hormones, calorific values of carbs, proteins, and fats, and disorders of the digestive system. So what is peristalsis. Have you ever come across with this term peristalsis? So peristalsis is nothing but it is the rhythmic contractions and relaxations of the muscles that are forming the lining of alimentary canal. Why this peristalsis is happening? What is the reason? Is this necessary? Yes, of course. The food which we are chewing in the buccal cavity, it should pass on all along the length of the alimentary canal till the rectum part, and that movement, the food itself is not having any locomotory structures or any energy to pass down through the alimentary canal. So that's why that food is depending on special process of contractions and relaxations of the muscles, that contraction and rhythmic contractions and relaxations together called peristalsis. You can see here in this image, the food which is present in the tube or alimentary canal is passing down by squeezing of the muscles. So this is peristalsis is radially symmetrical contraction and relaxation of muscles that propagates in a wave down a tube in an anterograde direction that moves food through the digestive tract. Digestive tract involves right from mouth to the anus. In between these two structures, there are different organs of alimentary canal, that is, mouth leads into buccal cavity. Within the buccal cavity, the food gets masticated or chewed, and in the presence of saliva, the food is transforming into a bolus, mass called bolus. Now that bolus is swallowed into the alimentary canal. So here, this is the tube. This peristalsis is not only restricted to the esophagus itself, but the peristaltic movements are occurring all through the length of the alimentary canal. This peristalsis involves contraction and relaxation of smooth muscles of the wall of the gut, resulting in successive wave-like movements. You can see here successive wave-like movements throughout the gut. It causes propulsion of food through different parts of the gut and exposure to efficient enzymatic actions. What is the reason why we have to undergo this peristaltic movements means this digestion, partial digestion within the buccal cavity is not alone itself for conversion of complex molecules into simpler process. So that's why in order to send the food bolus for enzymatic actions, very better enzymatic actions, the muscles are aiding in throwing out or sending the food into the different parts of alimentary canal by special movements called peristaltic movements. Got my point? Okay, students. Now, this food bolus, which is formed in the buccal cavity, is conveyed to the pharynx and then into the esophagus and then to the stomach, and after from stomach it is entering into small intestine and also to the large intestine. Usually the peristaltic movements are initiated from esophagus and are continued up to the rectum. However, the sphincters associated with the gut, getting my point? The sphincters associated with the gut. Already in the anatomy of alimentary canal, we discussed different sphincters like upper esophageal sphincter, lower esophageal sphincter, ileocecal valves, etc. So these sphincters associated with the gut regulate the passage of food through different parts of the gut. The function of sphincters is the regulation of food material which is passing through different parts of the gut. Peristaltic movements of the stomach. This stomach being a distended sac of esophagus, is this stomach is playing role in peristalsis? Yes, of course. Stomach also play an important role in peristalsis. That is, the peristaltic movements of stomach are together called churning movements. What is that name? The peristaltic movements of stomach together called churning movements, which are most stronger or very stronger than other peristaltic movements of the alimentary canal. And all these peristaltic movements are under the control of parasympathetic nervous system. They are stimulated by the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, fine. Next, let's have a look over this slide, how the peristaltic movements are taking place in sending the food bolus all along the length of the alimentary canal. Let's have a look at this video, please. When food is swallowed, it moves down in a tube called esophagus that connects pharynx to the stomach. The esophagus lies right next to another tube, the trachea, that takes air you breathe to your lungs. You might be shocked if the food got into this trachea, but fortunately, the body has a safety device that usually prevents this from happening. The opening to the trachea is guarded by a special structure called epiglottis, which acts as trap door. When you swallow food, the epiglottis slams shut to prevent the food from going down the trachea. The journey of food through the esophagus is a short one lasting only several seconds, but food just doesn't fall down the esophagus. In fact, if you choose to eat and swallow upside down, food will still quickly make its way up to the stomach. The reason is the food is propelled through the esophagus as well as the other parts of the digestive tract by a series of muscular contractions called peristalsis. Peristalsis works like a little tube of toothpaste. Squeezing the tube forces the paste out. Food moves through the digestive tract in much the same way. Muscles behind the food squeeze together, whereas muscles in front of the food relax. In this way, peristalsis forces food through the esophagus and other parts of the digestive tract. Is this clear, children? So how beautiful the peristaltic movements are taking place all along the length of the alimentary canal, and this rhythmic contractions and relaxations of muscles aids in sending of the food bolus to different parts of the alimentary canal. Yeah, fine. Sorry for the delay, children. Okay, the components that are present, the food which we are taking are majorly carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. So what is happening to these substances? Carbohydrates, proteins, fats are subjected to a complex process, that is digestion. After digestion, the end products of carbohydrates are glucose, fructose, galactose. Proteins are digested into amino acids, and fats are digested into fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, these are the end products. What is happening to these substances? So, the digested food materials are undergoing to the next process of nutrition, that is absorption. Absorption is nothing but diffusion of digested food materials from the lumen of small intestine into the blood. So this is the highlighted portion of the small intestine where it is showing two different parts of small intestine, that is jejunum and ileum. The end products of digestion are absorbed in the jejunum and ileum regions of small intestine. And how these substances are transported? They are transported through the intestinal mucosa into the blood or lymph. Here I am talking about two fluids. The substances are transported into blood or lymph. Why I am talking about the lymph means not all substances are digested or absorbed into the blood circulation. Certain large molecules which cannot penetrate into the capillaries, they penetrate or transported into the lymph capillaries like fatty acids. The absorption involves what are the different steps? Let us see. The absorption is carried out by three different processes. One is passive transport, simply we can say passive diffusion, facilitated transport, and active transport. So what are the three ways of absorption of digested food? Passive transport, facilitated transport, and active transports or active diffusion. Fine. The mechanical and digestion process have no goal to convert food into molecules small enough to be absorbed by the epithelial cells of the intestinal villi. The absorptive capacity of the alimentary canal is almost endless. Each day, the alimentary canal processes up to 10 liters of food, liquids, and gastrointestinal secretions. And 80% of electrolytes and 90% of water are absorbed in the small intestine. Okay, absorption of small intestine is carrying nearly about 80% of electrolytes and 90% of water are absorbed in the small intestine. What is absorption? Absorption is a complex process. It is a complex process in which nutrients from digestive food are harvested. It occurs by three mechanisms, major mechanisms. We discussed what that is: passive transport, facilitated transport, and active transport. What is passive transport or passive diffusion? Simply here in this image you can observe it refers to the movement of substances from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Diffusion itself is the transportation of substances from the region of higher concentration to lower concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. Here you can see the concentration of molecules is more here and it is less over here. So from the region of higher concentration to lower concentration without utilizing any energy or carrier molecules, simply the substances are moving through the semi-permeable membrane is called diffusion. Second one is facilitated diffusion. So facilitated diffusion is also called carrier mediated diffusion. This refers to the movement of substances from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration using a carrier protein in the cell membrane. Clear? So, difference between passive and facilitated diffusions. Passive diffusion occurs from the region of higher to lower concentration, whereas facilitated diffusion also occurs from region of higher concentration to lower concentration. But the thing is, in passive diffusion, there is no involvement of any carrier ions or any proteins or any energy. Simply, it is occurring like anything. Whereas in facilitated diffusion, it is facilitated by a carrier protein in the cell membrane. Coming to active transport. Active transport refers to the movement of substances across a cell membrane going from an area of lower concentration to higher concentration. This is the difference you have to make a point. Whatever it might be the transportation, whether it is ionic transportation or electrolyte transportation or digested food material transportation, active transportation always occurs from the region of lower concentration to the region of higher concentration. Why? why the substances are moving from region of lower to higher. Diffusion itself is movement of particles from the region of higher concentration to lower concentration. Why this is in active transport from region of lower to higher concentration. Now we are talking about digestion of the food material. Digestion takes place in the small intestine. In small intestine, there is lumen and substances are transported into the blood circulation. So once the substances which are transported or diffused, majority of the substances are diffused into the cell, though less amount is present outside the cell, that is also required by the cells. So whenever the material is needed by the cell, it also wants or the cells seek to absorb the remaining substances present in the lumen which are in low concentrations. But at this time, to move the substances up the concentration gradient or against the concentration gradient, that is from lower to higher, the membrane protein itself is not having such energy. It needs extra energy in the form of ATP. So difference between passive, facilitated and active transport is in passive diffusion, movement of substances from the region of higher to lower concentrations. In facilitated diffusion, from higher to lower concentration, but it is mediated by a carrier protein without utilizing ATP. Whereas in active transport, movement of substances takes place from region of lower concentration to higher concentration by utilizing ATP by the membrane proteins, utilizing energy in the form of ATP. Is this clear? In this type of transport, proteins within the cell membrane acts as pump. In active transport, proteins act as pump using cellular energy in the form of ATP. Next, let's see the list of different substances, digested food materials and how they are undergoing absorption process, by which process they are absorbed. Small amounts of glucose, galactose, like these two are the monosaccharides, and some amino acids. Electrolytes like chloride ions, they absorb into the cells or blood by simple diffusion. Just now we discussed simple diffusion is nothing but passive transport. Passage of these substances into the blood depends upon the concentration gradient. So here this is a passive transport. Small amounts of monosaccharides like glucose, amino acids and some electrolytes are generally absorbed by simple diffusion or passive transport. Next, certain substances like fructose, amino acids, they undergo a process called facilitated diffusion or facilitated transport. Because the cell's plasma membrane is made up of hydrophobic phospholipids, water-soluble nutrients must be used transport molecules embedded in the membrane to enter the cells. Moreover, certain substances cannot pass between the epithelial cells of the intestinal mucosa. Here in this image you can see cells are substances are transported from lumen of the intestine into the blood through the cells, but these substances are not transported to adjacent cells because between the two cells there are tight junctions. That's why the substances cannot diffuse or they cannot leak into the neighboring cells. They directly absorbed into the blood circulation or bloodstream. Next, water always transported or absorbed by simple osmosis. Osmosis is nothing but movement of substances or liquids from the region of lower concentration to higher concentration. And certain substances, glucose, amino acids, some electrolytes such as sodium. You just make a point over here. Passive transport electrolytes are chloride ions are undergoing passive transport, whereas sodium ions, they undergo active transport and facilitated transport. Sodium ions are not simply absorbed into the blood by passive transport. They are absorbed by two ways. One is facilitated transport and active transport. And in this active transport, we already discussed energy is utilized in the form of ATP, and this always occurs from the region of lower concentration to higher concentration. Facilitated transport. So this facilitated transport is nothing but it's a spontaneous passive transport of molecules or ions across a biological membrane via specific transmembrane integral proteins. Make a note of this, my dear students. Facilitated diffusion is always aided by the membrane proteins which absorb the substances along with certain electrolytes like sodiums, and certain conformational changes occur in the protein that releases the substances into the blood or epithelial cells. Active transport. So this is very important. Active transport is always between lower concentration to higher concentration, which is assisted by enzymes and requiring energy. Let's see a small video how the active transport takes place. You probably already know that we will have the situation whether there is a lot of something on one side of the membrane and less on the other side. Here you can see the difference between substances. Here is the concentration is more and this is less concentration. There is a possibility of diffusion takes place. So diffusion always takes place from region of higher concentration to lower concentration. Diffusion is a passive process because an additional input of energy is not required. Whereas sometimes there might be a situation where there is less something outside and more inside, and still it needs to move it from the area of lower concentration to higher concentration where the energy is utilized in the form of ATP. Okay, here active transport is taking place, area of lower concentration to area of higher concentration. Let's look at a specific example. So here the ATP is required for the transportation of substances. This is one example. Here you can see a boundary between inside and outside of the cell. Outside of the cell there is low concentration of glucose and inside is higher concentration of glucose. And there is a membrane transport protein. This transport protein itself has no energy to transform the molecules or send the molecules from lower concentration to higher concentration. So it cannot permit the glucose to enter into the cell unless and until this transport protein is supplied by energy in the form of ATP. So this ATP gets broken down and allows the protein to send the glucose. So how this active transport takes place. Some examples of active transport are sodium and potassium ion transport, which occurs through the membrane of nerve cells. Glucose transport from lumen of small intestine into the blood. And third one is mineral ions transported from the soil into root hair cells. Okay. Now, let's see absorption of fats. Amino acids, that is the digested proteins, and monosaccharides like glucose, galactose, fructose, etc. They have transported by passive diffusion and facilitated diffusion, and certain glucose molecules are transported by active transport. And now, how the fat molecules are undergoing absorption process. This is very, very, very important, students. You have to be very conscious, and you will come across here the bile salts again. So what are bile salts? Yes, bile salts are one of the components of bile juice. The bile salts are glycocollates and taurocholates of sodium and potassium. What is the role of bile salts in absorption of fats? whether the bile salts are playing an important role in digestion process or in absorption, where they are utilizing properly. Yes. About 95% of lipids are absorbed in the small intestine. Bile salts not only speed up lipid digestion. Make a note of this. How much percentage of fats are absorbed in the small intestine? 95% of lipids are absorbed in the small intestine. And these the bile salts play an important role in lipid digestion, as well as they also essential to aid in absorption of the end products of lipid digestion. So what are the end products of lipid digestion? End products of lipid digestion are fatty acids and monoglycerides, nothing but glycerol, fatty acids and glycerol. So these fatty acids and glycerol, do they undergo easy diffusion or passive diffusion into the cells? No. They must be converted into some other substances called micelles. So what is the difference between fatty acids, large droplets of molecules, and monoglycerides? What is the difference over here? Fatty acids are of two types. Generally, triglycerides are digested into diglycerides and then monoglycerides. Triglycerides means three chains of fatty acids are binding to the carbon compounds. So those three chains of fatty acids are broken down into free fatty acids and monoglycerides. Two chains of fatty acids are free, and monoglycerides means one chain of fatty acids are connected to one carbon molecule. Is this clear? So fatty acids, triglycerides are digested into two chains of fatty acids, free fatty acids, and one chain of monoglyceride. That what is happening with these substances, why they cannot easily diffuse or absorb into the blood, whether they directly absorb into the blood or to somewhere they are absorbed. Yes, of course. Fats are the only substances which cannot absorb directly into the blood circulation when compared to monosaccharides, that is glucose digested substances, carbohydrate digested substances, and protein digested substances. Let's see how this process is going on. Short chain fatty acids are relatively water soluble and can enter the absorptive cells directly. Despite being hydrophobic, do you know the meaning of hydrophobic and hydrophilic? What is the role of bile salts over here? Why they are playing an important role in digestion of lipids and also absorption of the lipids? Yes, these bile salts are having two ends. One is hydrophilic end and another one is hydrophobic end. These short chain fatty acids relatively water soluble and can enter the absorptive cells directly. Despite being hydrophobic, the small size of short chain fatty acids enable them to be absorbed by enterocytes. Enterocytes are the special cells present in the wall of small intestine. Enterocytes via simple diffusion and then take the same path as monosaccharides and amino acids into the blood capillary of the villus. Only short chain fatty acids. Then what about large chain fatty acids? The large and hydrophobic long chain fatty acids and monoglycerides, here you can see monoglycerides are not easily suspended in the watery intestinal chyme. However, bile salts resolve this issue by enclosing them in a micelle. These long chain fatty acids and monoglycerides are enclosed by bile salts into small droplets called micelles, which is a tiny sphere. What is micelle? It is a tiny sphere with polar ends facing, polar ends nothing but hydrophilic, which are friendly to the epithelial cell surface. The intestinal epithelial cell surface is always friendly with the hydrophilic ends rather than hydrophobic. Clear? So these micelles are nothing but tiny spheres with polar ends facing the watery environment and hydrophobic tails turned into the interior. Means first they are facing their hydrophilic ends towards the cell surface. We can see here these are the two ends of the fatty acids. The chain which is having wavy motion is hydrophilic, which is turning towards the epithelial surface, and opposite end is the hydrophobic. The core also includes cholesterol and fat soluble vitamins. This core of long chain fatty acids, the micelles are having fatty acids, cholesterol and fat soluble vitamins. With micelles, sorry, without micelles, lipids would exit on the surface of the epithelial cells. Why these micelles are having two ends means, without these micelles, what is happening to the fatty acids without converting into micelles, they may stuck. They may stuck in the wall of epithelial cells before entering into the lacteals. That's why micelles can easily squeeze between microvilli and get very near the laminar cell surface. This is a laminar cell surface. At this point, lipid substances exit the micelles and are absorbed via simple diffusion. So these fatty acids which are having hydrophilic ends, first they attach to the surface cells of the epithelium. Finally, they turn immediately with the help of the bile salts. They turn the hydrophobic end of fatty acids and immediately they diffuse into the cells inside the cytoplasm of the epithelial cells. Now, these free fatty acids and monoglycerides that enter the epithelial cells are reincorporated into triglycerides. Means all the three together form two fatty acid chains and one monoglyceride chain. Again, they reincorporated into triglycerides. These triglycerides are mixed with the phospholipids and cholesterol and surrounded with a protein coat. There are a lot of changes that are occurring within the cells of the enterocytes or small intestine. Small chain fatty acids or single chain fatty acids and monoglycerides, they again after diffusing into the cell, they again reincorporated into triglycerides, which are surrounded by protein coat and transform into chylomicrons. These chylomicrons are transformed by the Golgi apparatus present inside the cells. And these chylomicrons, they immediately, instead of entering into the instead of entering into the blood capillaries, they enter into the lacteals, because lacteals are having large surface pores when compared to the capillaries. That's why these large molecules of chylomicrons, they could not pass through the small pores of the capillaries. That's why they enter into the lacteals. These lacteals come together to form lymphatic vessel. The chylomicrons are transported in the lymphatic vessel and empty through the thoracic duct into the subclavian vein of the circulatory system. Once in the bloodstream, the lipoprotein lipase, you can see the next slide. This is a schematic representation. The chylomicrons which are formed in the cell, they enter into the lacteals and transported to the lacteals. From the lacteals, they are entering into the left subclavian vein via thoracic duct by a process called exocytosis. In this thoracic duct or left subclavian vein, there is an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase. Clear? The thoracic duct, the lipoprotein lipase breaks down the triglycerides of the chylomicrons into free fatty acids and glycerol. These breakdown products then pass through the capillary wall to be used for energy by cells or stored in adipose tissue as neutral fat and tissue fat. Is this clear? Here in this image, you can see how fatty acids and monoglycerides are entering into the epithelial cells. And these, after entering into the epithelial cell, they are converted into chylomicrons surrounded by the protein coat, which is synthesized by the Golgi apparatus. And these chylomicrons, they are released outside and they are not entering into the bloodstream or capillary network. Instead, they are entering into the lacteals through their large pores. being large sized chylomicrons, could not penetrate the capillary. That's why they enter into the lacteals. From the lacteals, they enter into the left subclavian vein. In the left subclavian vein, the endothelial cells of these blood vessels are having special protein, that is lipoprotein lipase, which further converts triglycerides into fatty acids and glycerol, which are transported to liver and tissues. There they are stored in the form of neutral fat and tissue fat. Please note down this, my dear students. And I hope the absorption of fatty acids and glycerol is clear to you. Next, look at over the next slide. So does this absorption takes place only within the small intestine, or any other part of alimentary canal is also playing an important role in absorption? Yes. Different parts like mouth, stomach, small intestine, large intestine also play an important role in absorption of the substances. First, let us see absorption in the mouth. Certain drugs coming in contact with the mucosa of mouth and lower side of the tongue are absorbed into the blood lining or capillaries of the blood. Next, stomach. Absorption in the stomach. Some amount of water, simple sugars, and alcohols, etc. take part absorption in the stomach. Absorption in the small intestine. This is the principal organ for absorption. Small intestine, especially jejunum and ileum, are the principal organs of absorption of nutrients. The digestion is completed here, and final products of digestion such as glucose, fructose, fatty acids, glycerol, and amino acids are absorbed through the mucosa into the bloodstream and lymph. And last but not least, absorption also takes place in the large intestine, whereas water and some minerals and drugs are absorbed in the large intestine into the blood capillaries. Next, the next part of this topic is assimilation. So you can see three pictures over here. This blue color tube, which is indicating, is the alimentary canal, where digestion takes place, and complete digestion takes place in the duodenum, and substances are entering into the lumen of small intestine. From the lumen of small intestine, the substances are diffused into the blood vessels or capillaries by a process called absorption. Now, this blood is transporting, or it is carrying all the digested substances which are absorbed into the blood. What is the destiny or fate of these substances? Of course, the destiny of the digested substances is nothing but each and every cell of the body. The blood is transporting all the substances to each and every cell of the tissue, and the process of absorption or diffusion of substances from the blood into the tissues is called assimilation. I'll repeat again. Diffusion of digested substances from the lumen of small intestine into the blood. Between lumen of small intestine and blood is absorption. Between blood and cells, the diffusion between blood and cells is assimilation. I hope this is clear. Once again, the diffusion of digested substances from the lumen of small intestine into the blood capillaries is called absorption, whereas diffusion of substances from the blood capillaries into the cells or tissues is called assimilation. So after assimilation, the digested food materials get oxidized within the cell, and that results in the production of energy in the form of ATP. Okay. Do all the substances are absorbed into the blood? No. Certain substances which are not digested and which are not absorbed, those unabsorbed substances are subjected to a process called defecation. This defecation is also called agitation. Agitation is the last section or last step of nutrition. So I'll repeat again, nutrition involves 5 different processes: ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and agitation. Once assimilation and absorption takes place, the unabsorbable substances are eliminated out of the body by a process called agitation. So the agitation role is carried out by the large intestine. This large intestine is having three parts. One is ascending limb of the colon, transverse colon, descending limb. Descending limb is again converting into S-shaped, turning this S-shaped limb of large intestine is called sigmoid colon, which in turn open into rectum, and finally that rectum opens out through anus. So what is happening in this large intestine? Absorption takes place. Certain water, minerals, and drugs are absorbed in the large intestine wall, and this large intestine wall secretes mucus. This is very important. Large intestine wall takes part in the secretion of the mucus. What is the role of mucus in the large intestine? This mucus helps in holding the undigested particles together and lubricating it easy for passage out of the body. So all the undigested food materials are held together by the mucus secreted by the wall of large intestine. And undigested, unabsorbable substances, which mostly include fiber of plant material called roughages, they also eliminated out of the body. How this agitation process is taking place? The undigested waste, which are present in the large intestine, they get solidified after reaching the rectum. So once solidification takes place, the wall of the rectum distends. Whenever the wall of rectum distends, the receptors, sensory receptors present in the wall of rectum, they initiate a neural reflex, or they send information to the brain where neural reflexes are caused, and finally the valves or sphincters of the anus will open, and finally the material will be adjusted out through anus. So this is a slide which is clearly explaining how the neural reflexes are generated. So once entry of feces takes place by mass peristalsis to the rectum, the wall of rectum gets distended. So once the wall of rectum gets distended, sensory nerve endings are stimulated, and these stimulated impulses are transferred to the brain or central nervous system, which in turn they are transferred to the wall of rectum, and finally that helps in opening of the valves, and finally defecation occurs. So this is a schematic representation of how agitation takes place, my dear students. Please note down this. Undigested food in the large intestine, after reabsorption of certain materials, the undigested food which is stored in the large intestine temporarily gets solidified in the rectum part and transform into feces. These feces undergo mass peristaltic movement or forceful peristaltic movements that expel the contents out through anus, and that process of expelling out of feces or undigested food is called defecation. Next, coming to gastrointestinal hormones. Only the digestive system or gastrointestinal tract is playing an important role in nutrition. How the nutrition and other functions are coordinated. The functions of gastrointestinal tract are coordinated by the neural as well as hormones. That is chemical coordination. The neural and hormonal control. The activities of the gastrointestinal tract are under the neural and hormonal control. So what are the sensory actions that are triggered by this neural and hormonal control? Sight, smell, and the presence of food in the oral cavity, that is stimulating the salivary secretions. Gastric and intestinal secretions are also similarly stimulated by neural signals. Muscular activities, just now we discussed, peristaltic movements are triggered or stimulated by the parasympathetic nervous system. So the muscular movements of alimentary canal are also under neural control. What are the hormones that are secreted by the gastrointestinal tract. Students, look over this. First hormone is gastrin, which is secreted from epithelium of stomach. Sources of hormones of different gastrointestinal tract are very, very important. Please note down, my dear students. Gastrin is the first hormone which is secreted from epithelium of the stomach, and its function is secretion of HCl and pepsinogen. So target organ is gastric glands. Enterogastron or gastric inhibitory peptide is secreted by the epithelium of duodenum. Its function is it inhibits gastric secretions and gastric motility. Third one, secretin. Secretin is secreted by epithelium of duodenum, which stimulates the secretions of water and bicarbonates of the pancreatic juice. Means the target cells of secretin are pancreatic acini. Cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin is secreted from the epithelium of duodenum, which stimulates the secretion of pancreatic enzymes and release of bile. Target organs of this cholecystokinin acts on pancreas as well as gallbladder. Next, coming to the calorific values of different macromolecules which we are intaking. 1 gram of carbohydrates yield 4.0 kilocalories of energy. The same way, 1 gram of proteins also yield 4.0 kilocalories of energy, whereas 1 gram of fats are yielding 9.0 kilocalories of energy. That's why per day we are taking only 35% of fats when compared to other substances along with the food material. So we are intaking only less amount of fats because fats, 1 gram of fat is yielding more calories of energy when compared to the others. Right, coming to the disorders of the digestive system. So what might be the disorders of disorder? It is self-explanatory. Disorder means the orderly functions of digestive tract will disturb. They will get disturbed. So how, in what way the orderly functions of the digestive system are disturbed? By different ways. One is inflammation, second jaundice, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, and indigestion. Disorders of digestive system are mostly carried, they are because of bacterial infections, viral infections, and infection by different worms like threadworm, hookworm, pinworm, etc. What is inflammation? This inflammation you can also see when we exposed or subjected to mosquito bite. When any mosquito bites on the skin surface, we find some projection on the skin. So that causes redness, itching, pain, and heat. So 4 hallmarks of the inflammation we can come across. Here in these images, you can see the large intestine is infected by the tapeworm. So during severe conditions, the wall of the large intestine is subjected to certain hallmarks. The 4 hallmarks of inflammation are redness, swelling, heat, and pain. Whenever you come across the term inflammation, there are 4 hallmarks of inflammation: redness, swelling, heat, and pain. This is nothing but inflammation which is caused by microbial infections or nematode infection or cystode infections, etc. Second one is jaundice. In French term, jaune means yellow. That means this turning of skin and whites of the eyeball become yellow. That's why the disease name has given jaundice. It is mainly inflammation of the liver. Jaundice is nothing but it is inflammation of the liver, also called hepatitis. And the main hallmarks, main symptoms, common symptoms of jaundice are anorexia. Anorexia means loss of appetite. What is appetite? Feeling hungriness. Loss of appetite means the person will not feel any hunger or hungriness. Jaundice is a common condition in which the skin and whites of the eyes mucous membranes turn yellow because of a high level of bilirubin, a yellow-orange bile pigment. Jaundice has many causes including hepatitis, gallstones, and tumors. Next is vomiting. Throwing out of the contents from the stomach through mouth is called vomiting. The reflex action is controlled by the vomiting center in the medulla oblongata. Generally, once food enter into the stomach, the upper esophageal sphincter and lower esophageal sphincters regulate the outcoming of the contents that are present in the stomach. But in case of vomiting, why these vomitings are caused? What are the reasons for vomiting? The common causes of vomiting are foodborne illness, that is food poisoning or indigestion, bacterial or viral infections, motion sickness, chemotherapy, migraine headaches, medications like antibiotics, morphine or anesthesia, they all cause such vomiting, that is throwing out of contents of stomach out through the mouth. The main common symptom of vomiting is nausea. Next, diarrhea. Diarrhea includes two symptoms, that is loose motions and vomitings. So diarrhea is nothing but it is passage of 3 or more stools per day or more frequently than is normal for the individual. According to the survey of UNICEF report, 1.3 million deaths per year are recorded, and main symptoms of this diarrhea are nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, watery stools, and finally dehydration. Constipation. Constipation is quite contraction. This is opposite to the diarrhea, whereas in diarrhea, motions are becoming very loose, the stool becomes loose or liquid, whereas constipation, the liquid becomes, stool becomes very hard. Instead of becoming normal semi-solid, it is becoming hard, and that hard phases are unable to remove from or eliminated from the body. That results in constipation. The feces are retained within the rectum as it is hard due to low content of water, and the movement of the food bowel occurs irregularly. Other symptoms of constipation include stomach ache and cramps, feeling bloated, feeling sick, loss of appetite. Indigestion. Indigestion, the main causes of indigestion, not proper digestion takes place. Indigestion means improper digestion, that is indigestion, which is caused due to inadequate enzyme secretions or anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, and spicy foods. All these cause indigestion. Other reasons for indigestion are smoking, taking pills on empty stomach, and overconsumption of alcohols. These are also the other reasons for indigestion. Symptoms of indigestion. The people with indigestion may have one or more of the following symptoms: early fullness of the stomach or meal, uncomfortable fullness after a meal, discomfort in the upper abdomen, that is heartburn, burning in the upper abdomen, bloating in the upper abdomen, and nausea. Okay. So today we have discussed different topics like peristalsis, absorption of digested food, assimilation, defecation, gastrointestinal hormones, calorific values of carbs, proteins, and fats, and disorders of the digestive system. Okay, dear students, I hope you have followed every concept well, and let's go for assessment. So today we are going to discuss 2 marks questions as well as 4 marks questions separately. 2 marks questions, please note down. Distinguish between absorption and assimilation. Distinguish between diarrhea and constipation. Name 2 hormones secreted by the duodenal mucosa. And 4 marks question. If you take butter in your food, how does it get digested and absorbed in the body? Explain. Okay, children, I hope you understood well. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Prasanna madam is from Munagal School, Model School, and she's from Suryapet district. Yes, children, from by this, we have finished the first unit, A part, that is total digestive system, anatomy, as well as physiology, as well as disorders we have completed. Next time when the zoology class comes, we'll come with a new lesson, new system. Okay, thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Shailja madam.